Welcome to More to Know, a podcast to explore beyond the headlines. In every episode, we'll take a look at a topic and bring together voices on the subject who are experts or directly involved. We'll talk about what's in the news, science, technology, some sports, and just things that have more to know. I'm your host, Christopher Conover. In this episode, more to know about the efforts to save an isolated fish in the desert. Think of the Sonoran Desert stretching from Mexico into Arizona, and images of the iconic saguaro cactus jump to mind. Maybe you think of Gila monsters or rattlesnakes. But what you probably don't think of is fish, yet they're there. Springs, streams, and wetlands known as cienagas, though few, dot the landscape of the Sonoran Desert. And in those springs and ponds you can find the pupfish. They aren't big. Most are in the 2-inch range.
Pupfish are a very interesting group of fish. There's 3 species that have been found in the state of Arizona.
Meet Dr. Peter Reinthal, an ichthyologist or fish specialist at the University of Arizona. The Monkey Springs pupfish is now extinct, and the Sonoyta pupfish is in trouble. Earlier this year, researchers announced that the Sonoyta pupfish had completely disappeared from Mexico and was now only found in the wild in Quito Baquito Springs in Organ Pipe National Monument, which sits on the U.S.-Mexico border in Arizona. But that spring is threatened by a number of factors, including, according to Reinthal and other researchers, water use for the construction of the border wall, which is just yards from the pond. So there's an effort to save the pupfish who live there.
So what we're trying to do is, because a lot of the cienega habitat are under threat from water diversions or introduced species, we're trying to create replicate populations so that we can conserve the genetic diversity in case anything happens to the natural population.
One of the refuge populations is in what has been described by some as the largest terrarium you'll ever see. Others describe it as one of the best laboratories for understanding the way nature functions in different biomes. But most people know it as Biosphere 2. That's right, the place where humans tried to live totally enclosed in 1991. Now it's owned by the University of Arizona and is acres and acres of research. In the desert biome, there's a babbling stream going down a hill to a small pond that the pupfish now call home. The job of building that stream and its connected pond fell to Jason DeLue. He's a research specialist and biome manager at Biosphere 2. He says they tried to work with what was there and may have been part of the original plan when Biosphere 2 was built decades ago.
To some degree, you could see, especially up above the walkway, there was what we would call an arroyo, or a kind of wash-looking. It had never been, water had never gone in it, but we just kind of followed that course down. Once we got down to here, we kind of had to create our own course, and the pond, the large pond down below, we had to kind of just decide where that was going to be, and that concrete liner underneath kind of decided where it was going to be.
The Biosphere 2 staff also brought in a designer to help them initially, but making those decisions were not the part that made the team sweat, according to DeLue.
Really what we started doing was digging. So we dug a trench a little deeper with ponds all the way up. We dug the big pond down at the bottom. We got the liner in, so it's got a rubber liner all the way up it. And once we got the liner in, then we just started bringing in rocks. So thousands and thousands of rocks. Many of these were inside already, but the vast majority of them we had to go outside to bring in.
But a proper wetland also needs some plants.
So the planting, we brought most of these plants in. All of this. These plants that are growing along the shore, that's growing actually in the stream bed, we brought all of those in and installed them ourselves.
Actually, a student who was working with me on fish and knows wetlands plants very well, he picked a lot of these species he was an undergrad, and he's wanted to put native species in here for a more realistic and not ornamental plants.
So now that we know about where the fish are living in Biosphere 2, let's get back to them. Since they were placed into their new habitat a little less than a year ago, the fish have generated a great deal of interest with the tens of thousands of visitors to the facility each year.
They're really pretty amazing fish, and they're also very cute. And when they breed, they turn bright blue, and they have a lot of behaviors. So they're really fun to watch.
Dr. Reinthal says they didn't just set up a new home for the fish, there are also science questions he and the team hope to answer.
We also took fin clips when we were putting the fish in here, so we can actually check to see, we know how many individuals went in, and so we can sample in, say, 5 years and look at how the genetic composition of the population has changed due to what would be inbreeding depression, or how there's something called effective population size, which is basically the number of breeding individuals in a population, not the census population size. And so this is a way for us in a controlled environment that we can look at how the genetics change in a desert fish population.
And nobody has really looked at what inbreeding will do to a population of pupfish. There are about 100 species of pupfish around the world, and often they're very isolated because they are adapted to withstand very hot or salty environments. And even though they're only an inch or two long, they're big in the legal and regulatory world.
So one of the most famous pupfish is the Devil's Hole pupfish outside of Death Valley, and it's one small population that was a key species in the original Endangered Species Act, and there was a court case over water rights that went to the Supreme Court in the 1970s, where the Supreme Court ruled that the fish are entitled to this water too.
The cynic, or grumpy reporter, might ask, why do we care about a fish that lives in isolated desert populations?
As a biologist, I think we should treat all species somewhat equally. But one, we don't understand what a lot of these species, have and can do to help humans. So a good example is I've done a lot of work in Madagascar on the freshwater fish there and helped set up a park there. And there was a flower discovered, the Madagascar periwinkle, that turned out to be a very important heart medicine. So a lot of drug companies would go pharmaprospecting using various plant species that need to be protected. The other fish we're thinking of putting in here is the top minnow, the Gila top minnow. And they're a very interesting group of fish that we've been doing a project on them. And they've been used, they're found at the very surface of a lot of the cienagas. And for some reason, they don't get melanomas. They don't get skin cancers. So people have looked at what are the genetic composition of the top minnow that allow them to be resistant to skin cancer, which is something can be applied to probably 90% of the people in Arizona. Everything doesn't have to have a utilitarian purpose. That, as Oscar Wilde said, yeah, we have art for art's sake. So I think that, these species should be, we've done everything we can to get rid of them, so we should do everything we can to try to save them also.
So how are the Sonoyta pupfish doing in their new home inside Biosphere 2?
They seem to be doing very well because we've seen them breeding here. And we've seen young, so in less than 9 months we've had successful reproduction. So I'm sort of like godfather of fish. And it's very cool. I was really excited when I saw that they were actually breeding here.
The team hopes to someday return a population of Sonoyta pupfish to the wild, but there will always be a group of them at Biosphere 2 as an insurance policy. And that's it for this episode of More to Know. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Our producer is TJ Spiker, and our music is by Enter the Haggis. I'm Christopher Conover. Thanks for taking the time to find out there's always more to know.